Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call In Defense Of. This is where I take an album that some of the fans don't like, that the critics didn't like, that maybe even some of the band members don't like, and I come to its defense. So the album that I've picked for today is from 1983, and it's Pink Floyd's The Final Cut. The full name of the album is The Final Cut, a Requiem for the Post-War Dream by Roger Waters. This album came out at a time in Pink Floyd's career where there was a lot of stuff going on. And I think that affects some people's opinion of this record, because for many people, they consider this to be more of a Roger Waters solo album. And even in that long subtitle title that I just read to you, it ends with a Requiem for the Post-War Dream by Roger Waters. David Gilmour, it only sings on one song on the album. Richard Wright, a keyboard player, isn't even on this record. Nick Mason, although he's listed on the record, from everything I've read, he didn't play a whole lot on it. There's other drums and percussion is listed for this. So it's really a Roger Waters album, and I get that, how it could be considered a Roger Waters album. Now, you can make the argument, and some people would say, well, Roger Waters at this point in Pink Floyd was Pink Floyd, because The Wall was a lot of Roger Waters on The Wall. That was his concept, his baby. But on this, it's really pretty much all Roger. So I think for some people, it lacks a little bit of the dynamic that Roger and David had. Whenever I think of Roger Waters and David Gilmour, I think the perfect example of how they worked together was the song Comfortably Numb. You have the beginning verse that Roger sings, which is the minor key, the dour thing that Roger does. And then there's the uplifting, there is no pain, you are... David comes in with that, and to me, that's David Gilmour and Roger Waters, a good example of what the two of them brought to the group. It's sort of like the dynamic between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. John Lennon was sort of the more introspective, a little moodier. Paul was the more funner, upbeat guy in the band. So you lack that dynamic on this album. But for me, it works. I love it. It may not be it's not my favorite Pink Floyd record, but man, this is an album that I really, really love. And I've mentioned this before in other videos, that I love albums where you can put headphones on and hear all kinds of stuff going on, arrangement things, and that's all over this record. Roger's known for like the sound effects and things like that, and you hear that all over here. The talking in the background, cars zipping by, bombs going off, gunfire, clocks ticking, all that kind of stuff. That classic Pink Floyd using sound, concrete sound, they would say, is like, clocks and things like that as part of the arrangements, as part of the album. And I think what also lends to some of the problems that the other guys in the band, that David Gilmour had with this album, is that 5 of these songs were intended to be used on a wall, on an album. They were originally intended to be on the wall. They didn't feel they were good enough to be on the wall. They were thinking of releasing a record called Spare Bricks, where 5 of these songs were going to be on there. And David Gilmour's feeling of this was, these songs weren't good enough to be on the wall. Why are they good enough to be put on here? So again, for me, it works. I love the flow of the album. It depends on if you're a person who, Roger Waters, this is Roger telling the story of his father who died in the Second World War. It's a criticism of war and what it does to people and what it does to kids. So it is not, it's not an uplifting, happy album, really. It's a pretty it's a pretty heavy, moody album, which is, some would say, typical Roger Waters, right? That's what Roger Waters like brought. You think of The Wall, there's a lot of emotional, moody type things on The Wall. Well, this album is just that, top to bottom. It's a heavy listen, and when you really dig into the lyrics, it's really something. It's really deep and emotional, and it feels like Roger's really, this is like a therapy session for Roger. He's letting out all these childhood traumas and everything. So I can see how for some people this isn't exactly like a fun summer top down in your car type of record. This is a sit down with headphones, get into it, a real moody, emotional ride type of record. So it was produced by Michael Kamen, and he also played most of the keyboard stuff in place of Richard Wright. So, like I said, David Gilmour, he has a couple awesome, amazing guitar solos on this record that we're going to talk about, but there isn't a ton of guitar on it. There's a lot of orchestration, brass and synth stuff, and pianos and acoustic guitars and stuff like that. Nick Mason on drums, who, like I mentioned earlier, I've read didn't really play a whole lot on this, but he is listed on this. So, okay, Post-War Dream. The Post-War Dream, it's got a sound effects intro. Like I said, this is something that's going to run through the whole record. It's got the classic dramatic Waters vocals. And I love at the end of the song, there's a horn that plays. Da, 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 dun, 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 dun. It plays a little bit of a theme from the song The Final Cut that we'll hear coming up later. It sort of foreshadows that in a way, which I think is just great. Your Possible Past, it's got this echo repeated vocal style thing that is sort of a classic sort of signature Pink Floyd thing. You hear this a lot on The Wall, where he does this, do you think we could be closer, closer, closer? To me, that's like a classic Roger Waters, Pink Floyd production thing, and it has that in this song. Great dynamics in the song. A lot of these songs have this where it drops down really quiet, and then it, boom, and it just blows up into this really big sound. I've got it on vinyl, but I was listening to it on my Amazon Music HD, so I don't know if that's a remastered CD version, but it sounds great. The CD version sounds great. The album sounds great. This is one that has a great, awesome Gilmour guitar solo in it. Classic David Gilmour, melodic, the feel, the bend, the bending, the tone, everything there. It could have been, this for me could have been a song that I could have heard on The Wall. It seems like it could have fit into The Wall. And the 5 songs, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, the 5 songs that were intended for The Wall were this one, Your Possible Past, plus One of the Few, The Final Cut, The Fletcher Memorial Home, and Hero's Return. They were intended to be on The Wall, didn't make the cut. They were going to put it on Spare Bricks, didn't land there, landed on this album. So Your Possible Past, great song. One of the Few has this ominous sort of ticking clock in the background and this doo-doo-doo-doo guitar thing. Pink Floyd is always a band, and Roger Waters, you listen to his later solo stuff, they're not a band that, they often get lumped into progressive rock. And I can agree with that, but they're not a band that is in any way like a chopsy band, like soloing or lots of stuff going on. To me, they are the masters of taking small things, little things, and just putting them in just the right place, just the right tone, just the right sound, just the right lyrics. Just everything is moved around and put exactly where it needs to be. So it's not about big long guitar solos or drum solos or big intricate time signature changes. That's not what Pink Floyd is about for me. It's all about textures and dynamics and mood and just everything being in the right place. Every little sound effect. It never sounds like there's anything that's just I don't know, just there for no reason. Everything is there for a reason. It's like looking at a painting, and you're looking at this painting, and yeah, there's maybe a central figure at the front, but really the meaning of the painting is in the stuff in the background. Like maybe it's somebody in the room, the stuff sitting on their shelves, or the window or something. It's like, and that's what Pink Floyd is to me. You listen and you hear, you find the deeper meanings of these songs when you really start listening hard and digging around and hearing all these other things that are going on, the little melodies and themes that run through the sound effects. So one of the few, the ominous ticking clock, and it's got that classic Roger Waters sort of spoken vocals. Is it you? Is it me? Where he sounds like he's just whispering into the microphone, just great. And has this great line in it. When you're one of the few to land on your feet, what do you do to make ends meet? Roger's lyrics are just great. And you can hear like kids and laughing in the background. There's even a laugh there that reminds me of like one of the ones on Dark Side of the Moon. Next, When the Tigers Broke Free. This is not on the original album. This song is on the remastered version of the album, and it was released around. It was released in the Wall movie, and it was put out on a 7-inch single at one point, and then it was included on here, and it is just just great. It's got like a choir. It sounds like a men's choir, and it has this sort of military arrangement feel to it. There's a point where there's like a trumpet comes in again. It sounds like a military funeral march, and these choir vocals holding out these ahs and these chords and these big notes. It's just great. Sends a shiver up my spine. Again, a very emotional Roger talking about his father, and finding out about the whole album, talking about his father and the effect of finding out his father had died, how he found out and how that affected him. That theme runs through this entire album. The Hero's Return has this sort of Middle Eastern sounding electric guitar line. Roger's slashing, venomous vocals. This is the other thing that Roger does really well. Jesus, Jesus, what's it all about? Roger, to me, he has like three voices. He has the whisper, really like sinister whispering voice. Then he has this sort of snarling, venomous voice. Then he has that when he's up in his upper end, yeah, where he's like sort of shouting and like at his breaking point in his range type voice. So just great, and it resolves into this sort of strummed acoustic guitar thing that sort of changes and lightens up the mood. The Gunner's Dream starts with this big bomb explosion effect. Another song with like a sad, melancholy feel, these sustained strings, and there's a little tolling bell at one point. You take her frail hand and hold on to the dream. Great, great lyrics in the way Roger delivers it. There's this melodic, beautiful sax solo in it. And here's a perfect example of these subtle little things that are put in these songs that to me is what makes it really special. There's a part in the final verse where there's a string bass, an upright like orchestra bass note. It just goes in like a, and it just kind of comes in and out real. It's the only time in this song that happens, and it comes in towards the end there, and it's just so great that he thought, okay, it just needs this one thing right there, and it isn't overdone. It isn't on. It's just that one note right there, and just the fact that he thinks so deeply into this that each verse in all these songs, the verses have little different things, little different tonal things happening. Great arrangement. There's this heartbreaking line at the end, and no one kills the children anymore. Again, this whole album just has the tragedy of what war does to the people who died in the wars, and to the families and the kids. For me, this song has a similar feel to it to the song The Final Cut So this is one of my favorite songs on the record here, The Gunner's Dream. Next, Paranoid Eyes, a great string and horn arrangement behind Roger's sort of spoken style vocals. You hear these distant voices in the background. You can hide, hide, hide behind petrified eyes. And then the song lifts beautifully when the acoustic guitar sort of comes into it. A lot of these songs have that element to it, this sort of drop down, really relaxed. And then it either explodes into a big bombastic thing or it has this sort of lifting feel to it. All the songs have this sort of up and down, lifting, dropping down feel to it, which is a credit to the arrangement. It's, you know, after you've been hearing the horns and the strings and nothing else, when that acoustic guitar comes in, it gives you this different texture and it just, it takes you to somewhere else. Get your filthy hands off my desert. Is that a Roger Waters song title or what? It's massive bomb explosion at the beginning, and then it's got this sort of classical like string quartet or trio sound going on to it. The Fletcher Memorial, more anguished Roger vocals, strings and horns moving beautifully in and out, and it's got this great melodic guitar solo from David Gilmour. David Gilmour is just the king of the perfect note. The whole Pink Floyd philosophy never sounds like David Gilmour's just playing something for the sake of playing it or trying to show off. He is so melodic. His vibrato, his bends, his tone, so emotional and just immediately recognizable as his style, his voice. You know, he has such a voice on the guitar. Southampton Dock starts off with these like bird seagull sounds. Roger on a lone with a lone acoustic, and then these piano chords at the end, ding ding, lead into the final cut. The final cut, one of my favorite songs of all time. I absolutely love this song. It is so emotional. It builds beautifully into the chorus. Thought I ought to bear my naked feelings. Just great. There's like a keyboard part in this. It always reminds me a little bit of Comfortably Numb. It's got another great, just beautiful guitar solo by David Gilmour. His guitar tone is just, it's just perfect. And when Roger comes in at the end, I sang a little bit of it there earlier. Thought I ought to bear my naked feelings. Thought I ought to tear the curtain down. I held the blade in trembling hands, prepared to make it, but just then the phone rang. I never had the nerve to make the final cut. And then that piano. Oh my goodness. That is just such a well-written, such a beautiful, emotional song. Sometimes when I hear that song, it makes, I get emotional listening to it. It is just so great. Then Not Now John, maybe the heaviest song on this record, maybe the most upbeat song too, and the only song to feature David Gilmour on the vocals. It's got these sort of industrial like sound effects in the middle, which are really cool, and the background vocals. Now John, we gotta get on with this. Not now, John. These background vocals and blank all that, we've got to get on the, you know, the curse word in it, which is cool. As a kid hearing that, it was like, whoa, they're like cursing there. You know, when you're a kid before the internet and not able to see R-rated movies and stuff like that, cursing like that was a big thing. And it has a Roger Waters comes in on the vocals, which sort of makes you think, you know, what could this album have been if David Gilmour was more involved in it, if there was more David Gilmour on this with his vocals, with his guitar, and him adding what he adds to the band. Like I mentioned earlier, that sort of Comfortably Numb A-B dynamic that him and Roger had. What would this album have been if David and the whole band was more involved in it? I don't know. Would it have been better? I don't know. I love the album the way it is, but I mean, I love David Gilmour so much too. I can only imagine that it would have taken it even up another couple notches. It's got another great, it just sounds like a very David Gilmour solo that could have been on the wall. It's even sort of, it sounds a little bit like it's quoting some things from the wall. And then the album ends with Two Suns in the Sunset, which after all this heavy, heavy, moody, emotional stuff, it sort of takes the album out on this oddly sort of upbeat feel with the strumming acoustic chords, these passing car sounds, but then it has these ominous lyrics like about a nuclear bomb dropping, your windshield melting, and then it just gets taken out on sort of this tuneful sax solo. And I wouldn't expect anything less from Roger. You know, he sends it out on this sort of this the credits rolling in the background while the bomb is going off, and there's this soundtrack like, oh well, you know, we're just two suns in the sunset here, you know, it's just driving off and it's just over, the bombs dropping and everything. So just a great album for me from beginning to end. I love putting on headphones, listening to this from top to bottom. It's such a ride, so much going on, such great songwriting. The song The Final Cut, one of my favorite like rock ballads of all time. Just a great album. If you haven't listened to it in a while, give it another listen, put some headphones on, take it for what it is. Don't get upset. Don't try to compare it to any Pink Floyd before this. Pink Floyd was always a band that evolved anyways and changed. You think about the Syd Barrett era, and every Pink Floyd album is a little bit different. So it's a strange way to sort of, Roger left the band after this point, and it's sort of a strange way for him to go out. You know, maybe this would have been better as a Roger Waters solo album. I don't know. If he had ended his time with The Wall, it certainly would have been, you know, going out on a big dramatic note. I don't know, you know, if he had hung around for a couple more albums. I love all those later era albums, Animals, The Wall. You know, it's just all amazing stuff. All the Pink Floyd stuff I love, and it's all a little bit different. So this album for me, it's just, it fits and slots into a different place, but I love it anyways. So, all right, there you go. Pink Floyd's The Final Cut, a requiem for the post-war dream by Roger Waters. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments. Make sure you hit subscribe and like. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.